Weldon predicts that the United States will be the victim of another major attack by Islamic terrorists. He explains why at this talk from the Foreign Policy Research Institute in Philadelphia. It's just over an hour.
I'm Alan Luxembourg, and on behalf of the Foreign Policy Research Institute, I'm delighted to welcome all of you here today for today's book talk. Our guest today is Congressman Curt Weldon, who has represented Pennsylvania's 7th District since 1987, and he has, over the years, played a leading role in defense and national security issues. He has been a co-founder of a unique parliamentary exchange between the Russian Duma and the United States Congress. He has led a number of congressional delegations to North Korea for a series of high-level talks, and he is now Vice Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee and the Homeland Security Committee. He has spoken at FPRI forums on U.S.-Russian relations and on the North Korean nuclear issue. Today, however, he is here to speak on his new book, Countdown to Terror. The provocative subtitle of the book is The Top Secret Information That Could Prevent the Next Terrorist Attack on America and How the CIA Has Ignored It. I will say no more, and let me ask you to welcome Congressman Curt Weldon.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you. Let me thank Alan and FPRI for their outstanding work. We're so proud and pleased to have FPRI based in Philadelphia and yet provide such a valuable service to members of Congress from both parties. The scholarly work done by the staff here and the researchers and the fellows is outstanding and plays an important role for us in the Congress as we attempt to deal with some of the more difficult foreign policy issues in the country. It's a special pleasure to be back at FPRI today to talk about my book and the underlying assumptions and assessments made in it. It's a book that I wish I didn't have to write. But as recently as Thursday of last week, I was continuing to provide updated information to our intelligence community because, as most of you know, last week the common thought by most of the pundits in America and around the world was that Rafsanjani was going to be the president of Iran following the sham elections that were just held. Well, on Thursday evening, I met for 2 hours with the chairman of the Intelligence Oversight Committee, and I went through much of the information that is in the book, and I said, I'm going to make another prediction to you. And this is in front of his staff and in front of my staff. I said, Rafsanjani's not going to win the election that's coming up in a few days in Iran. In fact, it's already been decided. The votes are in. It'll be a landslide. And the conservative mayor of Tehran will win. Well, that was on Thursday evening, and you all saw the results in the election. That's a continuation of a pattern of information that I've been fed, that I've been upset that the CIA is not taken seriously. And so, as a vice chairman of both of the two senior committees in the Congress dealing with security, both Armed Services and Homeland Security, I decided there was only one other recourse for me to pursue, and that was to, along with a CIA agent friend of mine, Dr. Peter Pry, who could not be here today, a 10-year veteran of the agency who has written 5 scholarly works as an expert on assessing threats, joined with me, and for the past 2.5 years we have gathered the information that is in my book that I'll discuss here today. I wish I didn't have to write it because, as a patriotic American, I would hope and think that our system and our agencies should in fact be able to respond without provoking this kind of national debate. But I tried, and it didn't work. In fact, this is not the first time I've met with frustration, and so I'll start off my discussion today with a summary of the first chapter of my book because it lays the foundation for my frustration. You see, it goes back to 1999 and 2000. I was then the chairman of the Defense Research Subcommittee. My job at that time was to oversee your money that we spend on cutting-edge technology for our military. And that includes cutting-edge technology for assessing intelligence issues within the military. My job then was to support the standing up of information dominance centers for each of our services. The Air Force, the Army, and the Navy were each standing these capabilities up in 1999 and 2000. My job was to oversee the funding for those efforts, as well as many other efforts, about $40 billion worth of other efforts. I was impressed with the work being done by the Army down at Fort Belvoir. The facility in operation was called LIWA, the Land Information Warfare Assessment Center. And I was impressed with their work because besides building up a capability to monitor our Army classified systems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they were doing more. They were creating a capability to do data mining and data collaboration. They had access to very high-speed computers, and they had access to classified military systems. And so down at Fort Belvoir, working in tandem with our Special Forces Command in Florida, down at MacDill, they were building a capability that did not exist in the country. I tested this capability, and I was impressed. I saw it, and I was impressed. In fact, it was in 1999 when I was asked to go over to Vienna to lead a delegation of 5 Democrats and 5 Republicans with State Department support to meet with 5 of the top Russian political leaders to see if we could not lay the foundation to end the Kosovo War on our terms, removing Milosevic from power. I was happy to play that role, but the Russians told me they were bringing a Serb with them, someone who I did not know, and I wanted to know something about this Serb because the Russians were convinced that this Serb and his family could help get Milosevic to agree to the terms that we would eventually achieve with the Russians to end the war. So I called George Tenet from the CIA. I said, can you run me a profile of this fellow? I don't know much about him, and my fear is that he might be a part of the Milosevic regime, and if he is, that would be a violation of the Hobbs Act. I don't want to be negotiating with a representative of the enemy. That's not the responsibility of the Congress. Tenet came back a day later and said, Congressman, we don't have much information, but I can assure you he's not a part of the Milosevic regime, but he does have ties to the communist leadership in Russia, and he does have serious input into Russian leadership. Without telling anyone, I called my friends at the Army's Information Dominance Center at Fort Belvoir. I said, can you run me a profile of this Serb unofficially? They gave me 10 pages. 10 pages of information. Detailed information. Now, it wasn't vetted, but it was good raw information for me to understand who I was dealing with. So I took those 10 pages and led the delegation to Vienna. We met, and very successfully over 2 days, we came to an understanding with the top Russian leaders. And by the way, the same week that President Yeltsin was being impeached by the communists back in Moscow, I had the #2 leader of the Communist Party, Shabanov, with me in Vienna. And so that Yeltsin knew that if Shabanov would accept this framework, that Yeltsin could get it through Moscow and support the conclusion of the war on the terms of the West and the U.S. To make a long story short, we succeeded. I came back to America, and about 2 weeks later, I got a call from the FBI. And the FBI said, Congressman, we'd like you to debrief us on what you know about this Serb. I said, fine. I do that frequently when I come back from trips and my country wants to know information that could help us assess the situation. And we planned it for Monday afternoon in my office. That Friday, before that Monday, I got a 911 page from my D.C. staff. Congressman, call CIA Congressional Affairs right away. They need to talk to you today. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon from Philadelphia, I called CIA Congressional Affairs, and they said, Congressman, we're sending 2 agents to Philadelphia by plane. You need to meet them at the airport. They'll either take you to a hotel room, or they'll come with you to your house or a location of your choosing. I said, I can't do that today. It's a Friday afternoon. I have commitments. I have events. What's the urgency? And the CIA said, well, Congressman, we've been tasked by the State Department to brief our ambassador who's negotiating the end of the Kosovo War, and we need to know something about this family that you met in Vienna. And I said, well, I've already been asked by the FBI to provide that information. It's already set up for Monday afternoon in my office. I said, why can't we do it together then? After a back and forth of 15 minutes and my stubbornness, and they realized I wasn't going to meet that Friday afternoon, they agreed. And so on Monday afternoon for 2 hours, I had a meeting with 4 agents, 2 FBI and 2 CIA. And I answered all their questions about the Serb. And when I finished giving them all of my information, I said to them, now you know where I got my data from? Oh yeah, you got it from the Russians. I said, no. Well, you got it from the Serb? No. I said, before I left Washington, I called the Army's Information Dominance Center, and they gave me 10 pages. And the CIA and the FBI said, What's the Army's Information Dominance Center? It was then that I realized we had a massive intelligence problem. 33 classified systems that you pay for with your tax money, none of which were integrated into a collaborative capability to assess emerging transnational threats. And so, for 3 years I fought the battle to create a national collaborative center. And for 3 years the CIA said, we don't need that, Congressman. We know better than you. We're the experts on intelligence. We know how to assess data. We have all the assets. You don't have any assets. I said, but you don't understand. You're not linking together these 33 systems, and it's already being done by the Army and Special Forces Command. They said, we don't need that. Trust us, Congressman. And I let them back me down. 2 weeks after 9/11, a representative of the Defense Department and Special Forces Command came into my office, and they brought me a chart. That chart. It's been slightly modified, but the same basic information. That chart was a result of a special effort by the Army and Special Forces Command in '99 and 2000 to identify al-Qaeda cells worldwide and in the U.S. That chart and its work was ordered by the Chief of the General Staff, General Shelton, and he ordered it to be conducted by the head of Special Forces Command, General Schoomaker. That was the result, and I was given to it, and I looked at it, and I said, I've got to go down to the White House. So 2 weeks after 9/11, I take that chart and go down to the office of Stephen Hadley. Stephen Hadley is today our National Security Advisor. Back then he was the deputy. I showed him the chart. It was a smaller version of this. He said, Congressman, where did you get this chart from? I said, I got it from the military. This is the process that I've tried to push the intelligence community to accept since 1999, and they've refused me. He said, I've got to show this to the man. I said, the man? He said, the President of the United States. I said, you mean to tell me 2 weeks after 9/11 you don't have that visual indication of al-Qaeda cells both around the world and in the U.S.? And he said, no. And so I gave him the chart. Now, on November the 4th of 1999, in my office, I had the exact time and the exact attendees. At Deputy Secretary of Defense John Hamre's suggestion, I had his counterparts from the FBI and the CIA in my office, and I gave them a 9-page briefing that I had produced with friends in the intelligence community off the record. The briefing was called NOAA, National Operations and Analysis Hub. The process to identify emerging transnational terrorist threats. That was in 1999. The CIA said on November the 4th, 2 years before 9/11, we don't need that, Congressman. We know better than you. We don't need that capability. They won. We lost. During '99 and 2000, our Special Forces and Army were using that capability. And what I have since found out when I published the book, and I have two formal written statements and 4 more verbal statements from military intelligence officers, that not only did they identify the cells of al-Qaeda, if you look at that chart up close when I'm finished today, you'll see the New York cell with the name of Muhammad Atta. Special Forces Command identified the Muhammad Atta cell in New York with 2 of the other terrorists at least 1 year prior to 9/11. And what I can further tell you today is Special Forces Command were prepared to bring the FBI in to take out Muhammad Atta's cell in New York City. The lawyers in the administration back then told them, we cannot go after Muhammad Atta because he's here with a green card and because of the fallout that we received from Waco. So I can now tell you today that Special Forces Command, using the system I was pushing to the CIA, which they refused to accept, not only identified Muhammad Atta's cell, but actually made a recommendation to take that cell out, which if we would have done, would have taken out Muhammad Atta and 2 of the terrorists that attacked us on 9/11. And the CIA said, Congressman, we don't need that. We know better than you. We know our intelligence job. Now that's in spite of their track record. They didn't predict the fall of communism and the fall of the Soviet Union. They didn't accept the walk-in when Vasily Mitrokhin, the highest-ranking KGB defector ever, wanted to come over to the U.S. in 1993. And when our CIA balked at him, he went to the Brits, and the Brits accepted him and gave him asylum. He died there last year. Vasily Mitrokhin had taken down the notes as the chief archivist for the KGB for a decade before 1992. The British intelligence went through those notes. It's become the largest source of information in history about the operations of the Soviet KGB. It was documented in a book written by Cambridge scholar Dr. Christopher Andrew, a friend of mine. In fact, I was chairman of the committee that brought Christopher Andrew over here to testify before my committee in 1998. It's called The Sword and the Shield, the secret files of the KGB. But again, in '93, the CIA said, we don't want that walk-in. We know best who can give us intelligence. And they refused Mitrokhin. It was the CIA who in 1995 got it wrong in our national intelligence estimate on emerging threats from ballistic missiles. It took Don Rumsfeld's commission, which I helped to orchestrate the development of, to come back and prove the CIA wrong and have them reverse themselves for the one and only time ever that they reversed the national intelligence estimate. The CIA did not know that North Korea had a three-stage missile in August of 1998 until the North Koreans launched it over Japan's sovereign territory. The CIA did not predict 9/11. The CIA got it wrong on the WMD for George Bush in Iraq. The CIA has just recently got it wrong on assessing China's significant military buildup. And I was on the Cox Committee that looked at the efforts where the CIA again failed to stop the proliferation of our technology to China. And so with all of that frustration, I bring you my story. It started over 2 years ago. A Democrat member of the House of Representatives, Ron Klink, who after he retired ran for the Senate against Rick Santorum, who was a TV anchor in Pittsburgh, came to me over 2 years ago and said, Curt, I need to talk to you. I said, fine, Ron. He said, I've got a source, a former CIA operative from this country who has some contacts in Europe who knows where bin Laden is. I talked to some of our colleagues in both parties and they said I should talk to you because you're the one member of Congress that pursues these issues. I said, fine, Ron, give me the information. He gave it to me. Within a week, I was down to see George Tenet and John McLaughlin at CIA headquarters. Now, I had been down there many times before. Tenet respected me. In fact, he had me down there for a breakfast with all of his reports when he first came into office and told them to work with me on any issue. And so Tenet and McLaughlin and I sat in the room along with my CIA friend who helped write this book. And I told him the story of what Ron Klink had told me. He said, Congressman, we want any information we can get on bin Laden. I'll assign my top operations chief to work with you. I said, that's all I can ask for. A day later, I received a call and I had a meeting. The operations chief came in and said, Congressman, we have run this name through our system and we don't really know much about this person. We've used all the different variations of spelling, but we're really not quite sure who it is. So we're going to have one of our people in Paris meet with him, and we'll assess him, and we'll try to establish his bona fides as a source for us. I said, fine, that's all I can ask. 2 weeks went by, and I got a call from Ali, the contact from my friend of Ron Klink's, who had contacted me through Ron. Ali said, Congressman Weldon, I finally had the meeting you told me I would have, but it wasn't with the CIA. And it wasn't with your country. I was called in by the French intelligence service. I was intimidated, I was threatened, and I was told that if I wanted to live in exile in Paris, I had no right to talk to an American and no right to talk to an American member of Congress, and that I should stop. As you can imagine, I was livid. So I went back and I called the operations director, who's since, by the way, been relieved from the CIA. I said, why did you lie to me? I said, you told me you were going to have one of our people in Paris meet with this guy, and you didn't. You had French intelligence meet with him, and he didn't deny that. He said, well, yes, Congressman, we did, but to be honest with you, we trust the French intelligence service. I said, well, excuse me, I'm not a professional, but I think France has a different agenda in regard to Iran than we do. And even if you do believe that France has better intelligence in Paris that would benefit us, why would you lie to me? Why wouldn't you tell me you were going to use French intelligence? Instead of lying to me and telling me that one of our agents would meet with this man, when in fact that wasn't the case. That began a process of frustration for me that lasted 2 years. In the 2 years, I have funneled over 200 pages of handwritten notes to the CIA. The notes would come to me faxed to my home that would look like this. And they would all be dated. It would all be sent from different hotels in Paris. So by dating them and by the fax date, obviously, no one could refute their authenticity. Now, I would take these documents to the CIA and turn them over loyally and patriotically, when at any point in time I could have taken this information and give it to a number of reporters who would love to have a story about activities inside of Iran and led by Ayatollah Khamenei. I didn't do that. The information was provocative, as you read in the book. The information included initially the location of bin Laden. I told the CIA he's being harbored in southern Iran inside the Pakistan border in an area known as Baluchistan. And he's in a town called Ladiz. I bought an Iranian map to locate the town. It's 10 kilometers inside the Pakistan border. And he's being protected by the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. Now, what I was told back then, which seems to make sense today, is that Khatami was the president of Iran, the leader, the prime minister of Iran. And he was trying to move the government in a reformist way away from Khamenei. And I was told that he wanted to embarrass Khamenei by showing the Iranian people that bin Laden was being protected in a country where they have completely different religious beliefs. And so the effort to get that information out to America was to embarrass Khamenei, to give Khatami some more authority and prestige inside of his country. Now, I was told by the CIA there's no way that bin Laden would be in Iran. It would never happen. Could never occur. The religious leaders and the mullahs and the ayatollahs in Iran would never accept bin Laden inside their country. Twice this year I gave the CIA additional information. Once that Osama bin Laden was in Tehran, and I gave them the exact neighborhood and date when he had a meeting with al-Zakari. And a second time I told him he was in an area 60 kilometers north of Iran at the foothills of an area I believe called Damarkand, where he was again being protected by Ayatollah Khamenei's Revolutionary Guard. And now, ironically, there are CIA analysts and generals in our military coming out publicly and saying, we've known bin Laden's been in and out of Iran all the time. Yet the first sources of those information came from the source that came to me 2 years ago. He told me that Iran was crashing on a nuclear weapons program, that they were manipulating the process with the IAEA. He told me the name of the overseer of their nuclear program. He told me they had sent 2 or 3 teams up through China into North Korea in an attempt to acquire nuclear technology and/or nuclear weapons. Now, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen articles in the open media where North Korea has openly admitted working with Iran on their deep underground bunkers. 2 years ago, the CIA said, never happened. Can't be the case. 2 years ago, I told the CIA that Ayatollah Khamenei was establishing a Council of 9, a group of 9 leaders separate from the Iranian government that were going to link together terrorist activities involving Islamic Jihad, Hezbollah, and Hamas. 2 years ago, I told them that Ayatollah Khamenei in one of the first meetings of the Council of 9, and I gave the CIA the notes of the first couple of meetings, who attended and who said what. Because one of my sources has a source inside of Khamenei's inner circle. And I told them Khamenei had had a dream, a vision. And in that vision, the 12th Imam returned to him. Now, as you all know, the 12th Imam is the holiest figure in the Quran. He disappeared from the face of the earth 800 years ago. When he returns, it will be the ultimate revelation for Islam. Ayatollah Khamenei said to his Council of 9, the 12th Imam returned to me and told me to attack the U.S. on its soil. And so the name of the attack, the 12th Imam, which is in my book, became a top priority. Not of the Iranian people, because they are not our enemy. And I say that in my book. But rather by Ayatollah Khamenei and his radical brand of extremists who have hijacked the Iranian government away from their people and who desperately hates Israel and who hates the United States. My sources told me that there were massive efforts to undermine Iraq so that we would never be able to be successful in stabilizing that country. They told me of hundreds of millions of dollars being spent through social front groups in Iraq that would eventually provide the instability to have Iraqi people be more loyal to Iran and the Ayatollah than to any government that Iraq would establish on its own. They told me, for instance, that there was a suicide plot against Sistani to wipe him out. Now, that didn't succeed, but the fact is that there have been acknowledgments of attempts to take action against Sistani. He told me something that was very provocative and very unusual that caused us to initially believe this guy was just making things up. When he said 18 months ago, Ayatollah Khamenei had decided that Arafat had gone too far in shaking the hand of Sharon, and so Arafat must go. And so 18 months ago, Ali told me that Arafat would be assassinated. Now, I can't say that he predicted the assassination because we don't know the full details of Arafat's death. But we do know that he's dead, and we do know that there was a great deal of controversy over the understanding of that death. He told me that there would be significant efforts in sending suicide bombers inside of Iraq. In fact, 9 weeks ago, he told me that they decided to send 100 new suicide bombers into Iraq. You've seen the headlines in the paper every day for the past 6 weeks. You've seen the suicide bombers all over Iraq. And in fact, I was in Iraq over Memorial Day. I led a delegation of 7 members, bipartisan. In fact, Senator Joe Biden joined me, and he was there for the meetings. We met with the Prime Minister of Iraq, the Speaker of the Parliament, the Defense Minister, the 2 generals in charge of the Iraqi military, as well as our own leaders. And not even talking about my book or my feelings, I asked each of them, why are the Iraqi people so much against us? They said, Congressman, it's not so much the Iraqi people. You have to understand. Those people who are attacking, those people who are undermining, are being fueled by those outside of our country. Okay, what countries? What country? Syria and Iran. Syria by the numbers, Iran by the quality of the unrest. So here we have the Iraqi leaders attempting to stabilize their country, documenting what my own intelligence service and your own intelligence service wouldn't document over the past several years. That Ayatollah Khamenei and the radical regime of his leadership have been fomenting unrest in Iraq that the Iraqi people and leaders fully understand. There were many predictions that were made by Ali to me. And Ali is more than one person, but it is primarily one person. But there were many predictions. I have never had the CIA come back to me one time and say to me, Congressman, you gave us bad information. Congressman, it was wrong. Now, some of the predictions, as I just mentioned to you, the assassination of Sistani, have not occurred. But in every other measurable case, these events did happen. In fact, early on, we decided to test Ali. Russ, if you could come forward and bring out the other chart. The test was, and that's why I brought a CIA agent friend in with me, because I'm not an agent, I'm not an intelligence person, and never want to be. So I brought in a CIA friend of mine who for 10 years worked for the CIA. And he's a very methodical person, very well organized, and he understands the methods that our spies use. So we agreed on 5 specific initiatives because the CIA first told me, well, Congressman, this information has happened, but he's getting it from open sources. He's reading newspapers. He's talking to people after the fact. So it's not information that ordinarily would not be would be of value to us. I said, okay, you're telling me it's from open sources. Well, then I have to test that. So we took 5 specific predictions. And they're listed above the top line. That Iran was crashing on a nuclear weapon, that Iran had sent delegations into North Korea, that North Korea might actually sell off nuclear capability, that there was an orange alert prediction, and that there was a terror threat against one of our reactors in the United States. We took those 5 predictions, and I had Peter Pry, Dr. Pry, on my behalf go to the Congressional Research Service. Now, the Congressional Research Service is an arm of the Congress, the Library of Congress. It is not partisan. They don't work for Democrats or Republicans. They work for all members of Congress. Without telling them why, I had Peter give them these 5 instances and challenge them to go worldwide in every news source in the world, every open source newspaper, radio, TV, online, internet service that's available, and determine when the first appearance of any of these stories ran. In each case, you can see that the first appearance of any of these stories is anywhere from 1 day to 3 months after I gave the information to the CIA as documented by the notes and the dates of the material that I provided to the CIA. So then how could my source read it in open source information when in fact he has no computer, has no access to the internet or even a typewriter? He has to handwrite his notes and fax them to me from different hotels each day in Paris. And some of these were very provocative. For instance, the Iranian delegations going into North Korea. I told the CIA on April 25th of 2003. The first story ran on June 11th of 2003 in Japanese in a Japanese newspaper. Now, how would my source be able to translate Japanese? And why would it appear several months after I gave it to the intelligence community, unless he wasn't relying on open source information? A second example is the example in the red and white lines. On May the 17th, Ali told me in a very specific missive, very detailed, that Ayatollah Khamenei had ordered an attack by 19 terrorists tied to al-Qaeda, primarily of Pakistan origin. He said they would attack a U.S. nuclear reactor, and they would do it with a commercial airliner, and that the reactor's first 3 letters were SEA. We immediately went to the CIA. I said, I don't know the name of the reactor, but it's SEA. That was on May the 17th. In June or July, I came back to them, and I said, I now know the name of the reactor. It's Seabrook in New Hampshire. August the 22nd of 2003, maybe it was a coincidence, but the Royal Canadian Mounted Police broke up a cell of 19 primarily Pakistanis who had just arrived in Canada from the Middle East, all of whom had ties to terrorist organizations. None of them had visible means of income, yet one of them had $40,000 in a bank account. One of them had been taking pilot lessons on commercial airliners and had actually flown practice over another reactor in Canada called Pickering. 2 of the other individuals have been arrested at 4 o'clock in the morning because they were on the grounds of the Pickering reactor site. Others had been arrested because they had had calls to their apartments where they had been playing around with incendiary devices and had actually purchased material with nuclear material, small amounts and quantities of it, cesium inside of it. Now, maybe it was a coincidence, but that was on August the 22nd. I had actually given the CIA the date of the attack. It was going to be November the 24th of 2003. This story was leaked out last year by a reporter who I could only surmise where she got her material from. And the folks in New Hampshire were visibly upset. So in January of this year, I called in the folks from New Hampshire, the intelligence officer for New Hampshire, the governor's office, and 2 leaders from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And I met with them in my office on January 25th of this year. And I said, were you ever aware of a specific threat against Seabrook? And they said, yes. I said, what was the date you were told? They said November the 24th. The exact date that I gave to the CIA when I first gave them the information on May the 17th. The first time those folks in New Hampshire were told about a specific threat was the day the attack was to have occurred, even though the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, at least in my mind, broke up that cell on August the 19th. I could go on with predictions of Ali. Again, in no case has the CIA come back to me and said, Congressman, you've given us wrong information or bad information. In fact, the only response to this by the CIA officially when they come out with their response to my book was a 1-sentence wording from their public affairs person, that they have researched this information over and over. I can tell you I've now declassified a letter that I did not expect to have to do, but when a former agent came out and criticized my book as unfounded, I remembered a letter the CIA had sent to me in June of last year, a 2-page letter that was still classified. And I had that letter down the classified vault of the Armed Services Committee So I called over to the CIA before I was to appear on Meet the Press. I said, I want to use this letter to show what you told me about this person, to refute what one of your retired agents is saying, who, by the way, is still on your payroll. And the CIA said to me, Congressman, give us the number of the letter. So I got the number off the letter. And they called my office back and said, Congressman, we can't locate the letter. I said, you can't locate the letter? I've just given you the identifying number. We can't locate it. I said, okay, then how about if I send it over to you on a classified fax machine, which we have in the Armed Services hearing room? And they said, fine. They called back a half an hour later and said to my staff, we're sorry, our classified fax machine is not working. So as a result, I didn't have that letter declassified for Meet the Press. But I continued to press and actually had a courier hand deliver a copy of the letter that I kept, that the CIA couldn't find, that they sent to me in June of last year, about my source, who at that time they encouraged me to continue to work with them. Now I'll tell you what they wanted. The CIA wanted my source to give them his sources. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out his sources would not be their sources. How could you take someone on the inner circle of Khamenei and expect that person to talk to a CIA agent? That's stupid. And the sources that my person had were both in the inner circle of Khamenei and those who wanted to cause a revolution in Iran. The other problem with my source, my primary source, is that he talks to Ghorbanifar. Now, he knew that. He told me that. Ghorbanifar, by the way, was a creation of the CIA. Not a creation of Curt Weldon, a creation of the CIA. They created Ghorbanifar during the Iran-Contra scheme. They funneled your tax money and my tax money into a creation of a person that in the end they claim lied and embarrassed them. And so because one of the people I'm talking to in Paris, and I would tell you every Iranian in exile in Paris at one time or another has talked to Ghorbanifar. He's very well known. In fact, at one point in time, I even talked to him. And he said, yes, Congressman, I lied to your CIA because they wanted me to give them my sources, so I gave them bad names. So the CIA now, because of a source that they created with our tax money, who embarrassed us all during the Iran-Contra affair, because Ghorbanifar talks to associates of people that I'm talking to, they said, we don't trust. We don't trust Ghorbanifar. Ghorbanifar is a liar. He's a fabricator. He's a manipulator. Well, he may be, but I say to the agency, you created him. Don't blame me for that. You created him. So that in the end, why would I decide to write a book? I'm the vice chairman of the two most powerful security committees in the Congress, Armed Services and Homeland Security. I have the most to lose. Some would say it might cost me the chairmanship of either committee, which I'm up for. I don't think that's the case. My colleagues in Congress understand me. They know what I do. And in fact, they've all rallied around me. As they read the book, they come back and said, you know, we knew the arrogance of the agency all along. An agency that when George Bush put Porter Goss in charge, tried to embarrass Porter Goss. The upper-level bureaucracy of the agency thinks they are more powerful than even the President of the United States. After all, remember, in the presidential election last year, several months before the election was to be held, a CIA agent who still works there got the approval from the bureaucracy to publish a book to embarrass the president. You want to talk about an agency that thinks it's omnipotent? Well, that's the upper level of the CIA. Now, I dedicate the book to the analysts in the agency, the unsung heroes. Those people have been fighting in the trenches. I dedicate my book to people like Dr. Gordon Ehlers, who was a CIA non-proliferation chief, who back in 1997 made a fundamental mistake. He told the Congress the truth, the way the same evidence that Benjamin Netanyahu had, that Russian scientists were working with Iran in developing the Shahab-3 missile. And for that, Gordon Ehlers was relieved of his job. Dr. Gordon Ehlers was one of the real heroes, in my opinion, within the agency. We introduced legislation following that revelation called the Iran Missile Sanctions Bill, which in spite of Clinton and Gore's objections passed the House with 398 votes and passed the Senate with 98 votes. Clinton vetoed the bill that year. And today Iran has the Shahab-3 missile system. It's done, it's complete. It was paraded through the streets of Tehran last summer, a very capable system that can strike at Israel immediately from any place inside of Iran. And so I had to write a book. I had to take the story that I've just told you to the American people, because I'm not going to let the CIA tell me I'm wrong again. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'd rather be embarrassed publicly than to lose good friends like I did on September the 11th. I work all the disasters for the Congress. I represent all the firefighters in America. In that regard, I was at the World Trade Center in 1993. I was taken through the bombed-out parking garage by Ray Downey. Ray Downey was then an officer rising up through the system of the Fire Department of New York. He would later become one of my best friends. Ray Downey in the mid-90s convinced me to introduce legislation to create a commission because he said, Congressman, we're going to be hit again. It's only a matter of time. And you've got to help us, Congressman. I said, Ray, tell me what to do. He said, create a commission that can look at how the military technology can assist us in defending the homeland. So I did. You all know that commission. It's called the Gilmore Commission. My legislation created it. Governor Jim Gilmore from Virginia chaired it, and Ray Downey was a commissioner. Before 9/11, they issued 3 reports. 40% of the recommendations of the 9/11 Commission were in the Gilmore Commission recommendations. But back then, nobody was paying attention. Well, on September the 11th, I got a call as I crossed the parking lot, walking away from the Capitol at 11 o'clock in the morning, from a battalion chief in New York. He said, Curt, I've got bad news. Ray's dead. He was leading the entire rescue effort for the fire department as the chief of rescue when the first tower came down. Would you come up with us? And so, like I do with all disasters, as soon as I could get an Amtrak train going in the next day, I went up to New York and spent the day at Ground Zero. Then I brought Ray Downey's widow and 5 kids and their grandkids down to Delaware County and had a parade of 40,000 people where we honored Ray Downey as an American hero. I've had it on my mind for the last 4 years that if I'd have pushed harder, Ray Downey wouldn't be dead today. Michael Horrocks was a pilot, a Westchester graduate, on one of the planes that was commandeered. They think his throat was slit. Michael Horrocks is a great American. His wife teaches school in Aston Township at a parochial school. His 2 kids attend school in Rose Tree Media School District. I helped build a playground in Michael's honor after he was killed. And I've often thought to myself, if I'd have pushed harder, Michael Horrocks might not have been killed on September the 11th. That's why I wrote the book. I am not going to allow a bureaucracy that thinks it has all the answers, but it has a dismal record of understanding terrorism and threats to our security, push me back and push me down to not tell the story that so concerns me for the health and safety of America and our people and our allies. That's why I wrote the book. I knew when I wrote it, it wouldn't be a positive thing, and I knew it wouldn't be on the bestseller list at the CIA bookstore, although I'm sure a lot of them probably bought it. But I wanted to give the American people something unique. You've gotten an inside glimpse of top secret data that if the CIA had collected this, you wouldn't see, ever. I would see it, but you wouldn't see it. Even I might have trouble seeing it. And I put it all out there for the American people to see, and I can do that because I collected all that data, every ounce of it. And I put it out there as a case study to show the American people and to allow the American people to make their own decision. This is America. And in the end, this country and our agencies work for the American people. The taxpayers' money pays the CIA agents and leadership who runs that agency. The taxpayers don't want agencies fighting with each other. They don't want agencies bickering over bureaucracy. Let me read you a part of a script that occurred between intelligence analysts in 1999 that were identifying the Muhammad Atta cell and wanting to take it out. Listen to this conversation that occurred in September of 1999, and these are from military intelligence officials. September 1999. At the inception of this classified project, which is mentioned in my book, it's called Able Danger, the CIA drags its feet and limits its support to the effort. In an off-the-record conversation between the DCI, Director of Central Intelligence, CIA representative to SOCOM, we'll call him Dave, and me, Dave explained that even though he understands the SOCOM effort is against the global infrastructure of al-Qaeda, he tells me that CIA will never provide the best information on al-Qaeda because of the effort that they were mounting as part of the finding they had on bin Laden himself. And if SOCOM Able Danger was successful, it would steal their thunder. Steal the thunder of the CIA. Isn't that absolutely outrageous? That they're worried about whose thunder's going to be stolen, as opposed to how we're going to protect America. Dave tells me that short of the sink, General Schoomaker, calling the DCI George Tenet directly, CIA will never provide the best information they have on al-Qaeda. To my knowledge, they never provided their best data. That's what's wrong with the system, folks. Now, there aren't many members of Congress that are going to come out and take on our intelligence. I don't have a choice. If it means I won't become a committee chairman, so be it. If it means I end up out of Congress, so be it. Are my 5 kids going to be protected? Are we going to have a safer America and a safer world? Or are we going to sit back because the politically correct middle-level, upper-level management of the agency says he doesn't know what he's talking about? We're the experts. We know better. We know what needs to be done. The purpose of my book was to generate debate in America, to generate support for Porter Goss. The agency was so arrogant that when Porter Goss was named, they tried to embarrass him. They leaked stories out about him because they thought they were more powerful than Porter Goss. Our intelligence belongs to the American people, not to a bureaucracy. No one bureaucracy owns the capability of our country to understand terrorists. The 33 systems that you pay for that are managed by 15 different agencies needed to be brought together so that we can have the best common intelligence about emerging transnational terrorist threats. My book is designed to get support for the 9/11 Commission recommendations. My book is designed to get support for the President's Commission on Intelligence recommendations. And in the back of my book, I go through the recommendations necessary to reform the intelligence service, to do more red teaming, where we have alternative teams that challenge traditional thought of emerging threats, to stop what we call groupthink, where we force at the upper level all of our analysts to come to one conclusion, when in fact there may be totally different conclusions, and we ought to understand each because the one in the minority may be the right one. To use more human intelligence. We have no substantive human intelligence in Iran and North Korea. In fact, Don Gregg, my good friend, who was for CIA 20 years their expert on North Korea, and who runs the Korean Society in New York, where I just spoke a month ago. Don Gregg has said publicly and repeatedly, the single biggest failure in American intelligence is North Korea because we have no idea what's going on there. I've been there twice and I agree with him. There's something wrong. And so a national debate on intelligence is necessary, and a debate that has the American people demand that these reforms that we're talking about be implemented. Now, the agency might try to spin this. They can do it all they want, but the facts are the facts. And I'm going to crisscross the country. I've already done over 50 radio interviews, and I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm going to continue to fight a system that doesn't want to hear about reform. I support Porter Goss totally. I support the intelligence oversight committees. I want them to have more responsibility. I don't want them being manipulated by the agency that thinks in the end they have all the answers. And I want our president to be successful in winning this war against terrorism and securing stability in Iraq and around the world. And in the end, I don't want war with Iran. And I say that publicly. That's why the book was published in Farsi. A very unusual effort on my part. Because I didn't want Ayatollah Khomeini spinning me as some kind of Salman Rushdie, trying to tell us people that I'm really against Islam. I'm not. In fact, I did a live broadcast, 30 minutes on Voice of America, into Iran the night before their first election. And it was translated by Voice of America to Farsi. And I'll tell you what I told the people of Iran. I said, we wish you no ill will. In fact, we want to be friends with you. We want to trade with you. We want our people to interact with your people. In fact, I'm very much aware the University of Pennsylvania Medical Center did a tremendous amount of work with the Iranian Medical Center. We want to link back those capabilities. We want to be friends again. But you need to understand, Ayatollah Khamenei is doing things behind your back that you're not aware of. And he's doing these in the name of your country and you. And then I recited all the things that I've talked about in my book. And in the end, I say, if these things can be refuted, invite me to Tehran. I'll come. And I'll sit across from your leaders. And they can tell me, as I asked Kim Gae-gwan from North Korea to tell me when I met with him for 10 hours 3 months ago, or when I met with Gaddafi in the middle of the desert a year ago to tell me where I'm wrong. In the end, we want peace with Iran. But we need to understand this radical regime of Ayatollah Khamenei is out to bring war. Now, I also devise and talk about a strategy that avoids war. And that includes the effort I just outlined to you. Because I hope in Iran we'll have what happened in Ukraine, where my good friend, Yushchenko, who I just hosted as a part of the hosting team in Washington when he spoke before the Congress, was able to drive 1 million people in the streets of Kiev and take back the Ukrainian government in the Orange Revolution. And I hope what occurred down in Georgia, where my friend Saakashvili was able to rally the people of Georgia in the Rose Revolution in taking back the country of Georgia against the oppressors. In fact, I'll be hosting his top assistant, Borjanadze, when she visits Washington in several weeks. My hope is that Iran will have the same thing occur. But in the process of that, we need to find new strategies. I met with Steve Hadley 2 weeks ago and reiterated a 4-point strategy that I gave to President Bush's people 6 months ago. A 4-point strategy that brings Russia back into the fold with us, that has Putin stop moving toward the KGB mentality and moves back into a solid relationship with the U.S. that goes beyond a personal friendship between Bush and Putin, but rather a substantive relationship, which is based upon Russia's understanding and feeling that America finally respects them. I'm convinced if we can do that, the one country that has maximum leverage with Iran is Russia. After all, it was Russia's scientists that helped develop, design, and build the Bushehr nuclear reactor, which is causing so much concern for Israel and us right now. So it was Russia that can play a significant role with us in helping to bring Iran back away from the radical regime of Ayatollah Khamenei, back into the mainstream of engagement with the West and those people that want peace around the world. So I thank you all for allowing me to come today. The book is provocative. I meant it to be. The book is real. It's based on information I was given, not from some radical right-wing source, but rather from a Democrat member of Congress who ran against Rick Santorum for the Senate seat a few years ago and is a good friend of mine. And the information has never been told to me to be false by the CIA. I challenge you to help me in the battle to protect America, to restore the kind of integrity to our intelligence capability that takes these 33 systems and blends them together on those threats outside of our country so that we truly have an understanding of emerging transnational threats that one day could bring our country to its knees. I'll be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much. We have time for a couple of questions. Mike?
Do you need a microphone for that one?
Yes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Heard in 1976, the Church Commission gutted the CIA as it was operating then for better, for worse. Apparently not for better. What would happen today differently in any kind of a reorganization that could really get things back where it should be working right?
Both the 9/11 Commission made some, what I call moving the chairs around on the deck recommendations, which are in many cases implemented, which I supported. The President's Commission on Intelligence, which has issued both an extensive classified and later unclassified report just a month ago, made some more substantive recommendations, which I'm pushing and Porter's trying to implement. My book has some recommendations. Now, I take a radical approach here, and I'll admit it. I call for a wholesale cleansing of the upper-level management of the agency, because I'd say we can't do any worse. And moving the younger, hungry analysts up who've been subjected to political correctness over the past 20 years. You know, I don't care whether it's a Democrat in power or a Republican in power. I want honest intelligence that gives us the best look of what the threats are out there. I don't want it sanitized so that it comes up to a preconceived conclusion. I want us to give an honest assessment so that we understand how to provide for our security. I think there's got to be what Porter has started, a continuation of a cleansing of the upper level management. Now, he started and has removed that upper level, a top floor of CIA headquarters, and that's a beginning. I think we've got to demand that Porter do more. I think besides the human change, the kind of recommendations I make are we need to start doing more red teaming so we have the alternative sources, stopping the groupthink, better use of human intelligence. We have basically no human intelligence on the ground inside of Iran. Let me give you another story. When I was in Iraq over Memorial Day, and we had the briefing from our general in charge of our intelligence, and we asked, and Joe Biden was there with me, so were the other members, well, what's our intelligence like with Iraq? It's pretty good. What about Afghanistan? It's great. What about Iran? This was the word he used. It's a black hole. It's a black hole. We know nothing about Iran. How can we be successful in operating in a country where we're getting information more and more now coming to the forefront that our Ayatollah Khamenei and the Iranians are playing a more aggressive role, and yet our intelligence over in theater is saying it's a black hole. We don't know what's happening inside of Iran. There's something fundamentally wrong. The other thing is John Negroponte, and I support it, although I discuss it in my book, and I had some concerns, and I still do, with having one overall DCI. John Negroponte, or one overall National Intelligence Director, I should say, not DCI, and John Negroponte has that role. When I met with him 2 weeks ago and he gave him a briefing 3 weeks ago, before the book came out, I showed him these charts. I said, John, you've got to understand, you've got to tear down the barriers between these agencies. I mean, there are 33 of them, and they all think that they have the final. You heard me read you some actual notes. We can't have that kind of mentality. The CIA may do a great job in one area, but so does the Defense Intelligence Agency, so does the NRO, the NSA, so does our State Department intelligence, so does Customs, so does Border Patrol. They all have classified systems. We need to have someone that can tear down those walls and create a fully integrated system. Now, by the way, that system that I pushed in '99 and 2000, which the CIA said we don't need, you heard me talk about that. That's the first chapter of my book. Guess what George Bush did in January of 2003 in the State of the Union speech? He announced the TTIC. The TTIC is a Terrorism Threat Integration Center. Exactly what I proposed in '99, which the CIA said we didn't need. But even with the TTIC, the Terrorism Threat Integration Center, which is now called the NCTC, the National Counterterrorism Center, let me show you a problem. Here I'm going to have to move, so I hope you can follow me. I want to show you the second chart. Russ, help me take it down. The second chart is Al-Qaeda today. Look at this chart. This was the one I gave to Steve Hadley 2 weeks after 9/11. It's been slightly updated, but the central, by the way, this is Muhammad Atta right here, identified with this photograph. This is the capability using the same system today of identifying Al-Qaeda cells worldwide. Every one of these humans is a cell. They're done strategically, and they're done by locations. I've been told by the military liaison to the NCTC that they cannot replicate this today in the NCTC. Now that's outrageous. How should I be able to recreate this using tools and technologies and software that are a part of the original SOCOM capability, and yet the NCTC can't do this today, using software tools like Starlight and Spires? This was done for me by the same people who came up with the initial idea of creating a national collaborative center. That's the kind of capability Negroponte has to have for us in the future. So to get back to your original question, the Church Commission and the Church recommendations did shake up the agency. I think it's time we have another agency shake up. In fact, I was offended. 3,000 American people were killed, slaughtered, and not one person was fired in our intelligence agency. If you ran a company where 10 people were killed, and you were a leader of that company, you'd be held accountable. And for the life of me, I don't understand why there weren't heads rolling after 9/11. Perhaps I should have spoken out then.
Just a brief question. What's in it for your source, and who's supporting it?
My source is, the primary source hates Ayatollah Khamenei. He loves Iran. He wants to move back to his homeland where his family still lives. He has family in Iran, in Tehran. He has kids in Tehran. He has brothers and sisters in Tehran. He wants to move back there with them. So he wants Ayatollah Khomeini out. Obviously, he'd like to have a government where reflects the will of the people. Would he like to see a revolution? Probably, but I'm not advocating a revolution. That's what people like Ghorbanifar want. He doesn't want to become rich. I mean, he's an old man, and his wife's dying of cancer. You know, he never asked me for large amounts of money. I mean, the only time he ever mentioned money to me was he said, if I'm going to get more information for you, I've got to pay off these people that are feeding me information. And I believe that to be true. And I believe he used his own money to get what he gave me. Use his own money. Because he thought that would entice the CIA to work with him. But it didn't work. They rebuffed him. And so, you know, unfortunately now, but he's still giving me information. I told you, on Thursday of last week, and I'll repeat it again, in the fourth floor intelligence room of the Capitol building, which is where we have all of our classified meetings, there were 6 of us sitting around the table from my staff and the intelligence committee staff, and I said, you know who the winner's going to be in the runoff election? Well, the common thought all over America and the world was, it's going to be Rafsanjani. I said, no, it's not going to be. It's already been decided. The radical conservative mayor of Tehran will win in a landslide. And we thought to ourselves, this is the ultimate test, because if it doesn't happen, I'm going to be embarrassed. You saw what happened. I believe it was 62%. That is a landslide in any country. 62 to 38.
We have time for one more question.
My name is Dennis Seaman, just a local teacher in Philadelphia. Thank you.
Not
for
just a
your
local
time.
teacher, I'm a teacher.
Yeah.
Teacher's a very important job, so you're a very important job.
It's tough, too, being in Philadelphia. From our Sixth Fleet in the Mediterranean to the Straits of Taiwan, U.S. sovereignty on the seas seems to be of eminent concern. Now, why is that conservatives in Congress, the DOD, and I think in the White House, too, are supporting the UN Lost Treaty, the Law of the Seas Treaty, which could really hinder, you know, just our movement. And I just, you know, with the rise of China, what is your opinion on that?
Well, if you've been following the national media inside the Beltway, there's just been some revelations about a secret classified report that was just leaked out that said the CIA missed it again, that there was a major criticism because our intelligence community did not anticipate the significant rapid buildup in Chinese military's capability that's occurring right now. In fact, we estimate they'll have a larger blue water navy than will have in 10 years. They will surpass us. Still using diesel subs, but they're developing a technology to go beyond that. And with their missile capabilities, with their blue water navy, they obviously don't need that for defensive purposes. I hosted the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee for the China People's Congress 2 weeks ago, and I said, why do you need a blue water navy? He said, Congressman, it's only for our defensive purposes. I said, defense? Why defense? I said, there's no reason for defense. We're not going to come in and attack you. We have this huge imbalance of trade with you. You know, we don't understand what's going on in China right now. We're also concerned that China understands very strategically how they would, if they ever had to come into a confrontation with us, how they would neutralize the playing ground. China, you know, understands we have very smart weapon systems and technologies, but if you read another part of my book, you'll see one of the other threats that the CIA has been largely ignoring is the threat of the use of an EMP and or directed energy, which are two phenomena that will be used in the battlefield in the 21st century. An EMP laydown has been understood by American military leaders for decades. In fact, we've tested it. Back in the 50s and 60s, we tested it over Hawaii and basically dumbed down the whole island. An EMP results when you can take a low-yield nuclear weapon, you put it on top of a missile system, perhaps like the Shahab-3 that Iran has, and you launch that over another country's territory, and you detonate the missile in the atmosphere. No one's harmed from that detonation. There's no harm to the people on the ground, nothing. But the electromagnetic pulse given off by that detonation fries all the electronic components beneath it, which means you would shut down our air traffic control, our electric grid, our telecommunications. Your vehicles would all stop because they all have computer chips in them. So in effect, if you wanted to shut down a society such as ours, you don't have to attack us with offensive weapons and kill people. In fact, you could put us in a real moral dilemma. If you launched an attack over our coast and detonated that weapon, you wouldn't harm anyone. But imagine pushing us back to the Dark Ages, where you have no means of communication, no cell phones, no electric grid, no telecommunication, no air traffic control, all of which makes our economy so strong, would be lost because our systems aren't hardened. Now, that's in my book. The CIA has largely ignored that threat. 2 years ago, I put legislation in that became law, creating the EMP Commission. That commission issued its findings last year. We held hearings on it. The Senate held hearings this year. In fact, I would suggest you might want to get the director of the EMP Commission up here to brief at a future FPR event on that emerging threat. Now, the Chinese understand EMP. So do the Russians. In fact, in Soviet nuclear doctrine, if there was ever going to be a nuclear confrontation back in the Cold War, both the U.S. and the Soviet Union had as the first strike an EMP laydown. We had it and they had it. So they would launch a missile over our sovereign territory, detonate it, and dumb down our capability. And we would do the same to them. Well, they're not the only ones that understand that phenomenon. So do the Chinese. So if you're looking to eventually take back Taiwan, which the Chinese obviously are, and eventually you might think you've pushed into a military situation, what would that be the thing you would do? You'd launch an EMP attack from above Taiwan and hope to take out the Sixth Fleet along with it, although we're now hardening all of our systems in the Navy. But in the end, you'd then be able to walk on the island of Taiwan and take it over. Those kinds of threats are real. In terms of your question, I have mixed reviews on the law of the sea treaty, and I would appreciate you give me some input in that, and I'll send you some stuff if you stay afterwards. I'll give you my card, and we'll have a dialogue on that, because I think there are both pros and cons for the law of the sea treaty, but it's worthy of debate, and I'll be glad to talk to you about it. Thank you all for having me here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Congressman Curt Weldon is Vice Chairman of the House Armed Services Committee. For more information about Countdown to Terror, visit Regnery.com.